All right, let's crack open a really fascinating and mostly forgotten intellectual game from the Middle Ages. I'm talking about a kind of mental workout that shaped the greatest minds at the time, all built around sentences that just sound, well, completely bizarre.
Take this sentence, for instance. The infinite are finite. Now, your brain probably did a little flip just now, right? It sounds totally impossible, a flat contradiction. This is a perfect example of what medieval scholars called a sophisma. And the wild thing is they didn't just dismiss it. They built entire careers around it.
So that's our big mystery for today. How in the world could the infinite possibly be finite? And maybe more importantly, what was the point of all these strange logic puzzles? Stick with me because we're about to unravel a pretty cool medieval enigma. Okay, first things first. We have to clear up a really big misconception. When you or I hear the word sophism today, we're thinking of something totally different from what a medieval scholar had in mind.
And here's where all the confusion comes from. Today, calling an argument a sophism is basically an insult. It means you think it's a slick, tricky argument that's designed to deceive people. But back then, the Latin term sophisma was something else entirely. It was a neutral, technical term for a very specific kind of teaching tool.
So a sophisma is really just a sentence that's intentionally difficult. It might be weird, like this dog is your father, or it could be ambiguous, where it changes its meaning based on how you read it. Or maybe it's only puzzling in a certain situation, like the classic liar's paradox. But here's the key. The goal was never ever to trick you. The goal was to explore what made the sentence so tricky in the first place. So how did they actually deal with these things in practice? Well, it wasn't some free-for-all debate. Oh no. There was a very formal, very structured method for taking every single puzzle apart, piece by piece. Let's walk through how they did it. This was the standard playbook, what they called the scholastic method. It's a 3-step process. First, you lay out all the arguments for why the sentence is true. That's the pro part. Then you lay out all the arguments for why it's false, the contra. Step 2, you present your own solution. And you're not done yet. For step 3, you have to go back and show exactly why the arguments you don't agree with are wrong. It's a full-on, systematic, logical takedown. Let's actually see this method in action. Here's a great example from a 14th century philosopher, Albert of Saxony. Read this one carefully. All men are donkeys, or men and donkeys are donkeys. So, is that true or is it false? Let's play the game. The entire puzzle, the whole thing, hangs on how you group the words. It's about where you put the invisible parentheses. So, the argument for it being true, the pro side, reads it like this. The first clause is all men are donkeys or men, which, yeah, that's true. And the second clause is donkeys are donkeys, also true. True and true makes the whole thing true. But the argument against it reads it differently. It sees it as all men are donkeys, which is false, or men and donkeys are donkeys, which is also false. False or false makes the whole sentence false. See the problem? And this is where the genius of the method comes in. So who's right? Well, Albert of Saxony's solution is both sides are. The sentence isn't really true or false on its own. It's ambiguous. His whole point was just to show that it's ambiguous and then explain the rules of logic that create the confusion. The exercise was never about winning the debate. It was about understanding the very mechanics of language that made the puzzle possible. So you might be thinking, okay, that's a neat trick, but why spend so much time on this? I mean, it just looks like a bunch of grammatical games, right? Well, for medieval thinkers, this was everything. This was the mental gym. This is how you got your mind to be sharp, precise, and incredibly rigorous. Sophismata were the ultimate training tool in the big universities like Paris and Oxford. They were used to stress test ideas in logic and grammar, sure, but they also used them in natural philosophy, which is basically what we've called physics, and even in theology. If you were a student who could master these puzzles, you were showing everybody that you could think with incredible precision about pretty much anything. And this is where it gets really interesting, with what they called physical sophismata. They are, for all intents and purposes, early thought experiments. I mean, get a load of this one. It's about increasing Socrates' power just up to a certain limit. Now, this isn't just about grammar. It's a deep puzzle about infinity, about limits, about what it even means for something to begin or end.
Does that sound at all familiar? It really should. Because these super abstract puzzles about beginnings and endings and infinity, they led to very real, very concrete scientific breakthroughs. By wrestling with these kinds of problems, a group of thinkers at Oxford, who were actually known as the calculators, they developed concepts that were absolutely essential for physics. They even figured out the mean speed theorem, which is a fundamental rule for describing accelerated motion. This wasn't just a game, it was proto-science. It was the groundwork. But, all intellectual traditions have their season. And the age of the Sophisma eventually came to a close. So what happened? Why did this incredible tradition just disappear?
Well, the practice pops up in the 12th century as this new, exciting way to teach. It has its golden age for a couple hundred years, becoming this absolute cornerstone of university life. But then, by the early 1500s, poof, it's gone. The new wave of thinkers, the humanists of the Renaissance, they just didn't have time for what they saw as nitpicky, overly technical philosophy. And so the whole genre just faded away.
So what's the big takeaway here? Sophismata were never about trying to trick people. They were a serious, sophisticated tool designed to do one thing: sharpen the mind by pushing language and logic to their absolute breaking point. And that brings us all the way back to our first puzzle. The infinite are finite. How can it be true? Well, think about it. There are an infinite number of finite things in the world. The puzzle is instantly solved the second you clarify exactly what you're talking about. It's all about precision. And that kind of leaves us with one last question to chew on. These medieval scholars had their Sophismata to find the weak spots in how they thought about the world. It really makes you wonder, what are our puzzles? What are the paradoxes and thought experiments that we use today to stress test our own logic, our own assumptions? What exactly are these Sophismata of our time?